Who here remembers the PS Vita? I still remember it fondly, like I do all of my beloved relatives who pass away. It was Sony's second attempt at a handheld console, and jokes aside, is still a fantastic way to play PS1 classics on the go. Now at the time, it had a healthy chunk of exclusives before the dark times. Some of these include Soul Sacrifice, Freedom Wars, and the poster child of this video, Gravity Rush. However, with the announcement that Gravity Rush 2 was in development and the director, Keiichiro Toyama, wanting the game to reach a wider audience, a remaster for the PS4 was pushed out in 2015 for Japan and 2016 for the West. And thank God it did, because there's something special about this game. I have my grievances with it, and we'll go into those soon enough, but there's a spark here which kept this game alive in my memory despite the title's flaws. So what better place to start than right at the beginning? The game opens, and we're greeted with my restless leg syndrome shaking the motion controls so hard it needed to call Child Protective Services, swiftly followed by the world's most resilient apple falling from a tree. Our fruity little friend rolls down the busy streets of an unknown city until it bumps into our main character, a girl with no apparent memories. Oh yeah, there's a space moggy just hanging out. Hey fam, what's good? The girl continues on her merry way before she's confronted by a man asking her to save his son. And it's here where we're introduced to the fun way Gravity Rush introduces us to a majority of our cutscenes, through comic book slides. And it definitely feels like a design choice that was selected to fit an overall theme, though that will be something I'll return to in just a little bit. Giving players the option to move the frames around using motion controls was also a fun touch. It doesn't really add much, but the idea is appreciated. Not long after the man asks the girl to assist his son, we look at the seemingly impossible task handed to us, as this young boy is about to get sucked into the pulsating floating anus which is slowly voring a small neighbourhood. And we can't just let this rascally rectum do as it pleases now, can we? So upsy daisy, it turns out that Puss over here grants our protagonist with unique abilities. Ones who wield them are known within the city, and the populace call them shifters. So how do these shifting powers work? It's quite simple really. You press R1 on your controller and gravity has now been shifted. You then either use the analog stick or the motion controls to point yourself in the direction you want to go and press R1 again, where you will then fall in whatever direction you so choose. Obviously this isn't the only thing gravity shifting can allow you to do. You'll be allowed to walk on virtually any surface in the game as if you're walking on regular solid ground, so long as you have enough energy in this meter in the top left. That's not all, but I'll return to a good selection of abilities you have at your disposal when I return to talk about the gameplay.
This isn't flying, this is falling with style.
And by using these shifting abilities, the girl comes to the boy's rescue, but is too late to save their house. Instead of thanking the girl for her services, both the father and the son blame her for their destroyed house, forcing her to flee and labeling all shifters as rotten. Thanks, Obama. Now alone in an unknown town, without a name or a place to call home, she notices another individual who shares the same power as her and gives chase, only to be confronted by a sudden wave of powerful bisexual energy before she jumps off without giving any answers. Immediately afterwards, she's alerted to the sounds of a struggle on the streets below and heroically jumps in to save the day. This bumbling newbie cop named Sid will later grow into a friend of the girl's, and although he keeps getting credit for her heroic deeds, she doesn't really seem to mind this. He's also the one who would give her a name, calling her Cat due to her eventual nickname, the Black Cat, and because of this little man who she names Dusty. And so, the game proper begins. With free reign of your gravity shifting abilities, you have access to an open world which will continue to grow as you fix this strange city which is slowly being eaten alive by the gravity storms. The city, by the way, and the world that the city is based in, are some of my favourite things about this game, minus Cat herself, whose boundless energy and being an actual garbage queen who lives in a sewer filled with trash she picked up off the street leads her to be quite relatable. But the city and the world are where a majority of my memories lie with this game, and that's because of the exploration that gravity shifting allows you to do. The game's main collectible are precious gems, which you'll use to unlock challenges and power up your skills. And they scatter them around the town in obvious places, and some which you can only access using your gravity powers. I can't count the amount of times I was soaring through the sky only to see a faint purple glow and slam on the fucking brakes, so I could quickly dash over and collect the harvest. Now, the world building in this incredibly short 7 to 10 hour game feels rich and engaging. being set on what appears to be a megalithic tree that Cat has supposedly fallen down from. The city, named Hekseville, that has been built around the structure feels drenched in European influence. And the design isn't the only thing which feels Eurocentric. The language that the characters speak in this game is wholly made up, but the director wanted it to sound French. France is definitely the biggest influence on the creative direction in this title. Not just the language, but the art direction as well. Specifically, the works of the bande dessinée artist Jean Giraud. The actual concept of Gravity Rush coming directly from one of the graphic novels Jean illustrated, known as the Incal. And after checking it out myself, it is so very obvious that Gravity Rush was inspired by his work, with a Japanese twist. And even got me into the Incal, which is a pretty fascinating graphic novel, so, you know, thanks for that. The music is really the cherry on top, composed by Kohei Tanaka, who you might know as the composer of the One Piece anime and movies. Some tracks give off an almost Dragon Quest sounding melody, whereas some stick to that French mood by tastefully incorporating an accordion here or there. It's a really solid soundtrack. However, there's one particular track which sounds like a certain boss theme from a very popular franchise, and I cannot unhear it at this stage. The main musical theme is overflowing with a sense of heroism, and this, alongside the comic book influence, is another big theme of Gravity Rush: being a hero. Now, apparently, Cat was based off of Western comic book heroes like Batman, and I mean, can you not see it? I mean, I'm asking you, because I can't see it. But there's no doubt that Cat is this city's superhero. I'd sooner compare her to Spider-Man than I would anyone else, and this especially ties into the feeling of freedom you get from dashing around the city with your gravity powers, in the same way you felt during Spider-Man 2 with web slinging. She is such a bundle of joy, and is always the first person to help someone out of their issues or fighting crime. That doesn't stop her from mouthing off every now and then, but to be fair, if I spent my days living in the sewers like a weeaboo ninja turtle, I wouldn't have to put up with people's shit considering I slept in it. There are so many nods to the superhero genre scattered throughout this game. Some are quite tropey and cliche, but I recognise that's the entire point. Getting amnesia, being hated by the general public only to rise in the ranks and gain your own nickname, having a rival who's you but wields goth titties, and I guess in a similar vein to Batman, no killing. The only deaths that occur are out of Cat's control, and she's extremely remorseful when it happens, even if the villain has caused her numerous headaches or near-death experiences. Unless she's being controlled by a meanie pants like myself who gives civilians harness-free bungee jumps. I hope they don't fall on their bottoms. Despite being, as I said, tropes, the world-building and mysticism which cocoon itself around this story allow this conventional tale to be surrounded by unconventional things, which, in the end, balance things out quite nicely. That's not to say things stick to being conventional, for better or for worse, and we will get to that later. Now, as I said, Cat does not kill. She may rough up a thug or three, but she wouldn't end their lives. Or, to be more specific, human lives. Cat's main foe within Gravity Rush are strange entities called Nevi, beings which are born from or are pushed out of gravity storms. Their behaviour is usually animalistic in nature, but some later along the line are proven to have a mote of intelligence. But the fact is that they're trouble, and Cat needs to sort them out whenever they're harassing civilians. I do not like the Nevi. In fact, I'd say they're one of the things I dislike about Gravity Rush as a whole, and a lot of this stems from a personal issue I have with their overall design. Nevi are so plain and basic as an enemy type that make up almost 90% of the things you fight in this game. Red and black blobs with almost gelatinous looking bodies with no other discernible features, and the ones which are a little bit strange and alien looking are still incredibly goofy with oval limbs, teeth, and God knows what else. I'll admit, they look fantastic in the concept art, but when executed, I'm not so sure. And that's without mentioning the fact that the Nevi take the big obvious weak point to a new extreme, where every single one has a copy and pasted red orb, or sometimes 10 if you're really lucky, which can sometimes make fights feel like you're repeating gravity kick, shift, over and over again. I'm aware that these designs were planned, and the strange, malleable shapes which make the creatures allow them to be close to what the concept artist envisioned. But when you put them side by side with anything else in this world, they're just so dull. Like you're walking the streets of some intricate, beautiful world and suddenly it's all, I don't know, they don't ruin the game at all, but simply having a massive strawberry jelly in the shape of whatever the fuck this thing is doesn't leave me feeling visually intrigued. Whilst we're on the topic of the Nevi, and since these are the things you'll be fighting with throughout a majority of this title, let's talk about the gameplay. I don't think we'll be here that long though. The combat in this game really boils down to a few basic things: ground combat and gravity combat. Though if you're like me and you discover the almighty power of the Big Steppy, you will more than likely forget that ground combat is even a thing. There is one surefire way of winning fights in Gravity Rush: grabbing precious gems and investing in your gravity kick and proceeding to go to goddamn town. Your regular combo is effective enough, but considering how the kick can decimate a majority of enemies in one shot, instead of lightly smacking them on the bum for a few seconds, I'm perfectly happy with sticking with something which gets the job done nice and fast. That's not to say the combat isn't fun, I just wouldn't say it's great either. I wish I could say that boss fights could let you experiment a little bit, but sadly it's mostly the same routine I said before. Gravity kick, shift, gravity kick. The best part about bosses is the journey there, since you'll usually get a super move which can decimate them faster than your standard kick, so long as the lock-on is working in your favour. It feels like the only time I wasn't on gravity autopilot was during the challenges. The challenges actually add stakes and prizes for completing it in the recommended amount of time, so of course I'd work hard for a juicy paycheck. It's a shame that I can't praise the gameplay as hard as I'd like to. I wish I could say it was more than serviceable, and thankfully in the sequel they do improve on things a fair bit. But we aren't talking about the sequel. If anything, I had more fun just playing around with the gravity aspect of the game, using Gravity Slide during the time trial segments and nailing my personal best, and just helping people who are in need. On the note of helping people, I think it's about time we move back onto the story, and how this simple hero's tale goes from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to a deep pool of questions and existential dread. As previously mentioned, Kat's adventure starts off with helping out those in need and getting a name for herself, initially coming into contact with a villain called Elias who gets off on stealing random shit. And it's after the police step in to apprehend her that the general public finally give her some recognition, slowly cementing herself as a hero of Hekseville. Then spliced in between this story of a young girl finding her own sense of self-purpose in an alien city and using her powers for the good of the people, God, ladies and gentlemen. You what? Yeah, they dropped this story thread on you in such a nonchalant way that even Kat is all, Grandpa, shut your fucking mouth. This man, the self-proclaimed god of this world, is named Gade the Creator, an absolutely bizarre inclusion to the game whose sudden appearance kind of works just because of Kat's reaction. It's the exact same as the audience's, like, who do you think you are, old man? Comparing yourself to Yoko Taro like that, but I jest. Gade's inclusion in the game serves a few purposes: to pose questions about this world and to grant Kat access to realms where the missing parts of a city are held. And by doing so, completely outing himself as an unholy sex pervert. Like, seriously, Kat, have you ever heard of stranger danger, you silly sausage? The realms themselves are a mixed bag for me. Some are quite fun, where you're given a set goal to reach, but you can go off course to be rewarded for your slight deviation of the goal. And then there are some which are just, Restricting your gravity shifting is fine on paper, but when shifting is where a majority of the fun in this game lies, you are effectively restricting how much enjoyment I'm getting out of this segment. The worst offender is a segment near the end of the game where it removes your ability to shift entirely, instead leaving you with a bare bones platforming segment which outstayed its welcome by around 2 segments. Thankfully, this was not the case for a majority of these dungeons, I guess, and I overall had a good time. It's a pity that some creative choices just didn't gel with me as much as I'm sure they wanted them to.
Bitch, are you for real?
So after exploring the realms a bit and restoring parts of the city, you have access to Plaisance, the pleasure district of Hekseville. And it's here where they introduce a story thread which at first glance looks like a filler arc. And honestly, in a 7 or so hour game, having filler would feel like the biggest slap in the tits. But thankfully, we get to see a part of Kat's personality which we wouldn't get to see otherwise. And that's with the introduction of boy McLove interest who Thirsty Kirsty over here falls immediately smitten over, helping him find a missing classmate whilst also showing off her shifting powers in order to get a cheeky peck on the forehead.
Well, that was incredible. What a rush.
A gravity rush. After saving the classmate from a Nevi who was actually protecting her from harm, the boy and girl end up discovering that their friendship is much more than that, and lovingly embrace, leaving Cat to silently walk away, conflicted about finding out that the Nevi were more than mindless animals and the dejection of the boy. Because end of the day, Cat is still a human being. At least at this point in the game, and with our knowledge of Cat, if it wasn't due to her amnesia, maybe she'd be able to enjoy a school life with classmates she'd call her friends, fall in love, socialize, but she can't, because she's the Black Cat of Hekseville. A hero's life can be quite lonely, and this segment is a nice reminder of that. Her only real friend is Sid, who has an almost symbiotic work relationship with her, and the only person who's similar to Cat in the slightest wants to violently Cabadon her through a brick wall. Speaking of which, who is this girl and what is her relevance to the story? Well, this is Raven, a shifter who we encounter a couple of times throughout the plot who initially starts off as extremely antagonistic towards Cat, claiming that saving parts of a city are ruining all of her plans. The other time we bump into her has one of the weirder excuses for story progression. We bump into this girl who dropped a love letter her boyfriend gave her, and Cat, ever the romantic, jumps down to help her search. What she comes across is the unsettling insides of a monolithic tree, which on an aesthetic level looks so otherworldly and mysterious. But sadly, the game decided to take away Dusty for no apparent reason, meaning half of your adventure is in total freefall. Which admittedly does feel pretty good until you're met with several of these.
He's already dead!
We clash with Raven further in, and as it would turn out, she was protecting a village found right at the tree's lowest point, completely inhabited by children who were taken by a gravity storm, the leader of the village being one Zaza, a traumatized youngster who was hardened to the world when his adopted sister fell into the ever-encroaching dark sea, which is inch by inch, rising further and further up the tree. Not only that, but we also find another god. Apparently deities just hang around Cat like planets revolve around a star. This deity is called Sayana, at least that's how I think it's pronounced, please don't jump at me, who claims that the world that Cat inhabits is actually a dream that she herself is weaving. I know this contradicts what Gade said earlier about him being the creator of this world, but trust me, the game doesn't really make this easy for anyone to understand, so just don't worry about it. Shh, don't question it, just be quiet. Everything will be quiet soon. Clearly, these gods making themselves known to Cat is no coincidence, and the vision that Sayana gives to her makes this more apparent, since at the very end of the vision, we see Cat approaching a large castle, and inside it is a queen. The implication here is that there's much more to Cat's history than she or us as audience members know, a history that is over 100 years in the making. So after that strange encounter, which Cat boils down to, that sure was silly, she assists Raven in taking down a Nevi which the children have nicknamed Nushi, and work together in order to activate an arc, which can hopefully take the children straight back to Hekseville. We find out that Raven is actually the adopted little sister of Zaza, her real name being Satya. However, it appears that she hasn't told him this information. This tells us that the lower down on the tree you are, the more time is displaced, considering that Raven is now 18 years old. It also turns out the reason she was antagonistic towards Cat is because a corrupt politician was promising her a means to rescue the children if the missing parts of a city remained missing. So in the end, Raven is not a bad person. Despite the whole murder thing, you cheeky rascal, she's just a girl who wants nothing more than to save the people she loves. Unfortunately, Nushi has other ideas and smacks Cat out of the arc. She awakens and makes her way back to the city, only to find that 1 year has passed and apparently things have turned a teensy bit V for Vendetta, as the corrupt politician who tricked Raven named Donalika has taken control, using high-powered military weapons and even cyborgs to quell the Nevi threat. One cyborg in particular is a girl named Unica, who we met previously in a very short encounter. It's obvious that things are under control, however, it's clear that people aren't pleased. Even the police force was merged into the military, leaving Sid no other choice than to become a soldier. Tensions in the city are slowly rising, and it looks like things aren't getting any better, as Donalika is planning on showing off his new super weapon, the Sea Anemone. Upon releasing it, things appear to be going fine. Even Cat is joining the fray and helping out, but unfortunately, Unica has been given orders to arrest her as she's no longer needed, enforcing classic Acme technology to turn our heroine into a catsicle, and using a hoover on the Moggy because it's all dusty. The puns! Okay, hold on. Things kind of happen all at once after this, so you'll have to excuse me. This is gonna get messy. Sid commits treason by freeing Cat from her shackles, the sea anemone goes out of control, and oh shit, hey God, what's good fam? God releases Puss from its prison, which allows Cat to be set free and engage in glorious combat. Gade turns up to push the Ark out of his prolapse, which means that Raven can join the fray. The three girls, now united in a common goal to protect the city and people of Hekseville, take down the colossal weapon, which turns out to be a Nevi in disguise, thus exposing the mayor as a corrupt politician, and bada boom, the day is saved. And then silence. The game ends on an anti-climax, as we see small events play out as the credits slowly roll, leaving countless mysteries floating aimlessly, as if defying gravity itself. This is where my biggest problem lies with Gravity Rush, and sadly, it has to do with the way it manages its story. It's ambitious with the plot threads it throws at you, but being such a short game makes it incredibly difficult to tie up even half of the loose ends. Now, I feel like a big part of the reason the story feels as rushed as it does is because of a split from PS3 to PS Vita. This split was something I neglected to bring up until now. An article from Gravity Rush Central shows the storyboard from the original game, and it looks like it was meant to be much bigger than it ended up being, combining the stories from both 1 and 2. I can imagine struggling to find a conclusion to a game where the ending had already been planned, having to trawl through your original concept and hope that the specific point you chose ends things in a satisfying way. But to give you an example of how rushed this ending was, from Cat re-emerging into the city a year later to the start of the credits, I managed to do all of this in under an hour. And in this time we're introduced to the main villain of the game, who I swear had less screen time than fucking Nushi and felt even less intimidating. So, virtually all of the mysteries that Gravity Rush presents to us remain unsolved, since if we were to take the whole PS3 to Vita thing into account, we're technically only halfway through the game. Even less considering Gravity Rush 2 is over 20 hours long compared to the first game's meager 7 to 10 hours. Coincidentally, I started watching an anime called Land of the Lustrous, something I'd love to talk about more on this channel if I can figure out how. This is a show which presents a lot of mysteries to you that, for the most part, remain unanswered by the end of Series 1. But it really feels like this show understands what it means to plant a good mystery. And the best thing it did was leave us at the end of the series with a definitive goal that the protagonists were setting out to achieve. The ending of Gravity Rush 1 just ends. It concludes, leaving mysteries floating in the wind with no clear goal to guide them. Cat doesn't really seem interested in pursuing her past and recovering her memories, instead letting the so-called villain sit in bed with a boo-boo on his head like, don't forget about this one kids, it'll be in the sequel. If the switch to the Vita caused this, then part of me really does lament the cohesion that a PS3 version could have brought. But, despite these very obvious issues with the story overall, I still really like this game. My criticisms come solely out of a want to have seen it come out better. And thankfully, the fantastic world building allows for some of these mysteries to be safely left up in the air. There are some amazing characters who've been written in a way where even if I forget about the game for a week or two, I'll still fondly think about them from time to time. The world itself and its aesthetic, with music that blends so well with its environments that everything just clicks. It's a stunning world that the developers have created, because what we got wasn't bad, it was just messy. Gravity Rush 1 Remastered is available on the PS4. I heavily suggest that you buy it and try it out for yourselves. It's not without its problems, as I discussed, but it's such a unique little thing that I'm very happy to have experienced, and I hope that many of you get to experience it as well. I'd like to end this video with a quote from Naoko Sato, one of the writers of this title. I'm happy to have written a character who can get knocked down again and again, but stand up for what she thinks is right and prevail in the end. And if life ever knocks you down, I hope Cat's example can help you get back up again. Well, holy moly, July sure was a dry period of time, and I'm sorry I couldn't get a video out before the month was over. I had 2 scripts I was working on, and both of them didn't really work out, but thankfully Gravity Rush swooped in and rescued me out of a bad writer's block. Speaking of Gravity Rush, the artist who drew the new thumbnail, called Scruffy Turtles, is the biggest fan of the franchise that I follow, so there's no way I couldn't get him involved in this project. Please go follow him and throw him a commission when he has spaces. Now, what are those names scrolling by on the right hand side? Well, they're my patrons, and if you want to join those lovely names, then all you've got to do is click the Patreon link down below and choose a reward tier. The $10 tier are actually getting production and progress vlogs, so if that interests you, then pledge away. Please also check out my Twitch, where I stream around 7 or 8 PM GMT. It's usually pretty regular, but sometimes I like to throw the occasional impromptu stream to spice things up a bit. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Go check out my other stuff, and while you're at it, please subscribe and hit the bell for instant updates. And I'll see you all next time.